So everybody who is anybody, it seems, critically has given this film an absolute drubbing. It has been out on Netflix for a little while. It does have an absolutely stellar cast in Helen Mirren, Pierce Brosnan, Sir Ben Kingsley, Celia Emery, and not to mention Richard E. Grant. But the thing is, I don't understand why people dislike it quite so much, because ultimately this is a by-the-numbers murder mystery. It is Agatha Christie light, if you will. It is a Midsummer Murder. It's you know, John Nettles, Bergerac. It's that sort of vibe. Ultimately, there's a slightly comedic thriller edge to it, but we are dealing with, let's be honest, actors who are in their veteran stage, and they know what they're doing, so they can hold the frame, they can hold the audience without really doing much, not even batting an eyelid. So I would love to say that there is more depth to this film, The Thursday Murder Club, than you would imagine on face value, but ultimately I don't think that's the case. Doesn't make it a bad thing, doesn't make it a bad film. If anything, you know, it's like comfort food. You know, Helen Mirren's character there's more layers to her, most definitely. There's more to Pierce Brosnan's character and to Ben Kingsley's character than meets the eye, but you get it in very subtle ways. You get it in a glance, you'll get it in a bounce back from a line of dialogue, you get it in the sort of the interconnection, the way that he connects, especially Brosnan connects with his son, played by Tom Ellis. There are very telling ways that you get this idea that there is more substance underneath than purely on the surface. So for all the reasons I've just outlined, from character to story to basically stellar stacked cast, I'm going to give this a 4 out of 5 on a big old 5 scale for The Thursday Murder Club. I've gone over the reasons, you know what you're getting. Dive into it if this is your bag, but don't expect it to, you know, re-energize your love of Agatha Christie, because ultimately that is not what this film is out there to do. So it's no surprise that there have been comparisons to Midsummer Murders, because Murder Before Evensong is adapted by the same writer behind those adaptations back in the 90s. Matthew Lewis equips himself very well as Daniel Clement, the local vicar who is new to the parish and comes into the town of Champton just when there is going to be a murder in his church. His mother then rocks up, played by Amanda Redman, who is ultimately almost the star of the show and almost overshadows Lewis at every conceivable turn. So on every conceivable level, Murder Before Evensong is very much a Sunday matinee, sort of post-Sunday roast afternoon series. It doesn't make it a bad thing. It is the equivalent of a murder mystery comfort food, if you will. This is Murder, She Wrote, this is Midsummer Murders, this is Columbo, this is anything you want to put on in the background. So after such a mediocre review, you may expect me to be giving this a 3 out of 5, but I'm actually going to bump this up to a 4. Why? Because actually what it does really well. It does kick into gear in the latter stages of the series, and it really does deliver on its premise, which a lot of shows of this ilk in this genre fail to do, and ultimately they lose track, they lose momentum, and audiences walk away indifferent. With Murder Before Evensong, this simply doesn't happen. So this is a story about a petty thief called Geoffrey Manchester, who is called the Roofman because he breaks into places by going down through the roof. Ultimately, this is it feels like a rom-com with comedy drama elements. Kirsten Dunst plays a housewife slash mother of 3 who is going through a divorce and encounters Geoffrey when he basically decides to hold up in a Toys R Us for the next 2 months. So ultimately what you have here is an extremely good comedy drama driven by very sharp scripts and very solid performances, a great ensemble cast. Peter Dinklage playing against type, being quite a nasty piece of work as the store manager of the Toys R Us that Geoffrey decides he's going to hold up in. You've also got a sense of real small town community Americana, which is thrown into sharp relief by this guy who ultimately he doesn't feel like a criminal. He feels like I don't know, just it's an everyman quality to this particular character. character, and Channing Tatum ultimately, what he is doing here is illustrating how much more of a leading man, how much more of a character actor he could be given the right material. So I'm going to be giving Roofman a 4 out of 5 on the big old 5 scale. Why? Because it is chock full of endearing character turns from an epic ensemble cast. It feels like a small town story, very much a sort of low key focus on character more than this is not a star turn from Channing Tatum. He literally does not grandstand on any level, and he allows everybody to get their moment in the sun. So ultimately, Roofman is incredibly it's a rare thing. It's an uncut gem, if you will, in terms of cinema, and everybody needs to see this on the big screen if they possibly can, and if not, they definitely need to catch it on streaming. So as you can imagine, not a great deal has changed since Karen Perry season 1, aside from one fundamental thing. She has been given a promotion. She is now a detective inspector. Her methods are still questionable. Her attitude is still irascible, but she is still considered to be brilliant by his superiors. This story unfolds around the miners' strike from 1984. So you've got flashbacks to the 80s combined with present day, obviously, shenanigans. So as I said in the previous section, there's a great interplay between the past and the present, and that really does tie very much into the story. There are younger versions of Cosmo's character, and obviously you get to see the background behind the disappearance, behind the supposed murder, behind the supposed kidnapping, and as all of these elements come together, it really does become quite an engrossing police procedural, and obviously the source material is top tier. So I'm going to be giving Karen Perry season 2, which comes out on BritBox very soon, a 4 out of 5 on the big old 5 scale. Why? Because the return of Lauren Lyle in the role is absolutely awesome. For someone who comes to this series absolutely fresh and completely unaware, I was absorbed from minute 1. There are only 3 episodes, but they are an hour and a half apiece. So you've got some form of Columbo sort of like structural thing, but stretched over an extraordinary amount of time, and it really does help build the story, and I recommend it to anybody. So as we are launched into season 3, we come hot off the heels of the cliffhanger from season 2, which find President Rayburn dead of a heart attack, and with Grace Penn, Vice President, being elevated up to leader of the free world. You've got conflicting agendas. You've got people scrabbling basically to try and figure out exactly what the next move is, and all the time you've got all of these relationships which have been sort of bubbling away on the hob in the background, coming to the fore in a quite spellbinding first episode that carries all the momentum and all the political intrigue you would expect from an established show like The Diplomat. So the thing that elevates season 3 more than anything is the focus on those relationships, whether it's between Stuart and Idra, who is obviously the conflicting sides of the line, one for the head of station for CIA, the other one obviously a close confidant of Wyler, both Wylers in fact. You've got also the curveball relationship elements of Hal and Kate and how that changes over the course of the season. You've also got Grace Penn and her husband, who is played by Bradley Whitford. People may know him from Brooklyn Nine-Nine, but he was also an alumni from The West Wing as well, and he brings such a delicate sort of comedic element to things which ultimately could get bogged down and overly dramatic, and therefore could essentially feel quite dry. He really, I think for me, he is the main, is the most epic addition to this third season in terms of the subtlety, in terms of drawing audiences away from, shall we say, the more political elements of this, and he really brings a humanity to the whole situation, which elevates the show and really makes this one of the great seasons of political television, in my opinion. So rather inevitably, I'm going to be giving The Diplomat season 3 a 5 out of 5 on the big old 5 scale, because what this does, it does so well. It expands the season, it evolves the characters, it makes the relationships more complex, and it also makes those political decisions and those agendas which underpin all of those personal relationships much more volatile. In every conceivable way, Deborah Kahn has not only done it, but done it again. This has now become one of the best, if not the best political thriller on Netflix. So Blue Moon is going to be unlike anything you have ever seen before when it comes to Richard Linklater. It is essentially a one-man band with Ethan Hawke playing Lorenz Hart at the epicenter of this thing. It's set in the bar of Sardi's on the opening night celebration of Oklahoma. The thing is, Ethan Hawke really embraces this sort of like discarded composer. He was an alcoholic, he was a genius, but he was also very camp, very kitsch, very outspoken. With a sharp tongue and didn't really suffer fools, but he was also an incurable romantic. All of these things come through the performance which Hawke ultimately gives. Andrew Scott is part of the equation. He does play some sort of role in the film ultimately, as does Margaret Qualley, but ultimately also this film really belongs to Hawke, and it feels like a love letter to Broadway musicals. So audience going into this film need to know that there is an awful lot of dialogue. It is a very singular film in the respect that there are two actors most of the time just on screen. That's Cannavale and Hawke playing this sort of like tag team, knocking it back and forth across the net to each other in terms of dialogue. Also, it does feel quite stagey. It feels very much like a stage performance almost, and Hawke treats it as such. It is through the jiggery pokery of digital effects. He's also lost a couple of inches, so he is doing not a Toulouse-Lautrec, but he is a somewhat shorter actor than normal. And he's embracing the campness. You know, at the end of the day, whether Hart was a bisexual man or whether he liked ladies, it didn't really matter, I think, at that point to him what he liked. But the point is that culturally speaking in society, that thing was still illegal. It was frowned upon, even though it was an open secret amongst the Broadway fraternity, one would assume. But even that aside, it's a human frailty story. It explores the flaws of humanity. And the things we sacrifice sometimes in the search for something creative, something original. With great creativity comes something, equally, should we say, self-destructive in its own way. So there are lots of different things to explore within Blue Moon, which come through very much in that central performance from Hawke. So on all the evidence and the performances therein, Blue Moon, Richard Linklater's latest, which was at the London Film Festival this year, is going to get a 4 out of 5 on the big old 5 scale for me. It comes down to that tour de force performance from Ethan Hawke, I think, alongside a supporting cast, an ensemble which includes Bobby Cannavale, Margaret Qualley and Andrew Scott, and it really does bring a different tone. It's a different approach from Richard Linklater. It feels like a step up in terms of maturity, and it really feels like a true departure from the writer-director. So on that note, I'm going to dive into my trailer. Let's do that. And so it is, you've reached the end of another video review, this time for Blue Moon, which is written and directed by Richard Linklater, stars Andrew Scott, Ethan Hawke, Margaret Qualley and Bobby Cannavale. So this is a bit where I go, if you've liked the video, then give me a thumbs up. Failing that, you can always just drop a comment in the comment box below and I will respond. And finally, just subscribe so that every Tuesday and every Saturday when I drop another of these videos literally into your lap, you'll get a little notification. You can pop in and watch or listen to as much or as little as you'd like, and then go about your day. In the meantime, check out the rest of the channel and maybe pop over to the Patreon page. Take care. Cheers now. Bye.